Okay, we are live. We'll just wait a couple minutes for people to hop on.
Okay,
and let me
cool.
I'm going to look at my phone to make sure that I'm in the right place.
Okay.
Okay, there we are. I see it.
Is it on your Facebook? I'm not seeing it yet.
Yeah, I see it. And then my group, I see it. Yeah.
Okay, let me go there again. It's still not showing up for me on your Facebook page for some reason.
Let me see if I can. I just tagged you.
Okay. Okay.
If it's showing up.
Not yet.
That's weird.
We'll wait for a moment here and see if it shows
There's
up.
a delay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's possible. It just doesn't seem to be loading for some reason. My internet's working fine, but it looks like it's not loading.
Okay.
So just give it a minute, because I'm not seeing it on your page or getting the tag yet.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's interesting.
Hi, Debbie. All right, if you are here, okay. Oh, there's a couple people are hopping on. Hello. Say hi. So I am using StreamYard, and you do have to give it permission to access your name. So if you don't do that, I can't see your name. It'll just say like user. So if you give it permission, then it says Facebook user. So if you give StreamYard permission, those of you hopping on, I see you, Debbie, somebody else, Facebook user. So if you can give StreamYard permission, and that way I can see your name. All right. And we'll get started.
I'm just going to put a comment that they can go to your page to see it, since it's not showing up here.
It's not showing up. Okay. Hi, Annie. Yay. All right, cool.
All right.
Okay, so hopefully we're good. Yeah, I don't know how that works. All right, so hey everyone, thanks for hopping on. Say hello if you're here. Give StreamYard permission. Today I'm here with Mike Thomas. Yay, super excited. Mike and I have been connected for a while, and he's always got some really, really good information. And I like what he has to say, his content, and he's somebody that really gets the nervous system. He gets it and he embodies it. So I just love that. And I'm excited for today's kind of live stream that we've got going. So I'll let Mike, if you want to introduce what you do, your training background, website, where people can find you, all that, I'm just going to hand that off to you because.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Tracy. It's an honor to be speaking with you here. So I own a business called Holistic Fitness Lifestyle. And what I do is trauma-informed mindful movement. So that applies in a couple of different ways. I help people with fitness to regulate their nervous systems more effectively, and so improving their fitness through that means. I help people with emotional balancing. I use tools like nonviolent communication. And I also help people with their relational skills. On relationflix.com, I have a class called Relational Regulation. And you're welcome to join my Facebook group at it's HFL, standing for Holistic Fitness Lifestyle, 30-day fitness habit reboot. And I'll be discussing all sorts of different tools to support your habit regimen that helps you to more effectively regulate your nervous system. But today, I wanted to talk to you, Tracy, about translating the nervous system via our stories in life. What are our stories in life actually saying in terms of nervous system language?
Yeah, super excited about that. Yeah. Always a good, really good topic to discuss. So we're gonna dive into attachment a little bit and implicit memory. I might try to bring some slides up if I could figure out how to work that. And yeah, really, how that translates into relationships, right? Because trauma is relational for the most part when we're talking about childhood developmental trauma and attachment trauma, right?
Yeah.
And so it gets healed in relationships.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's what a powerful concept, especially in our culture where we tend to be very individualistic. I can do it myself, which, as you and I both know, is a trauma response in and of itself. To try and do it ourselves, to isolate ourselves. No, I don't need anybody's help. We actually need one another, not only to develop our brains, but also our emotions, our social skills, and our capacity to be resilient. We learn the ability to self-regulate through co-regulation. And so that experience of relationships is what creates that blueprint to be so-called independent. It's really an interdependent experience.
Yeah, totally. So true. And and I hear that a lot, like, oh, I can do it myself, or I'm on this healing journey, myself, and I've done a lot of work. And well, that's a good start. Again, the stories in the mind that there's just like that, there's just no way that I know of to do that by yourself, because of those those protective responses that really fly under the radar, that really most people view as their personality, right?
Oh yeah, my goodness. Yeah, this is where I'm chomping at the bit to talk about implicit memory.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So, I always thought that, well, this is just the way this is my personality, right? I'm like this like type A overachiever, and I do everything to the max, and all of these things. And most of those things were trauma responses. And when I walk my clients through this process, they're kind of like, it's kind of scary, right? Because you kind of start losing your identity. You built your identity around trauma responses, and then they're like, holy, like, who am I if I'm not all these things? It's kind of scary. And I remember that for myself as well. Like, if I'm not all these things, who the F am I, right? And then there's that whole uncovering of that process too. But yeah, let's go ahead and dive into that implicit memory. What is implicit? Because I think a lot of people don't know what that is, right? So let's just start there with the basics.
Sounds good to me. So I like to use an example that Dan Siegel brings up often in his teachings. If those of you who are watching are not familiar, Dan Siegel is an expert in attachment. He's an expert in trauma, and he is a therapist, psychologist, and researcher. And he talks about implicit versus explicit memory with the example of a cat. So if you see a cat, you might think the word cat, C-A-T, cat, right? The explicit memory of seeing a cat before will then come back to you as that word. And you can use that as sort of a code for some deeper layers of things that are happening underneath. So the next layer, which is also explicit, that is, you're aware of it, is the implicit emotional, otherwise known as episodic, an episode of when I first encountered a cat. I happened to be allergic to cats, and they scratched me a lot. So my experience emotionally was not a pleasant thing. I would get puffy, and I would have clogged nasal passages, and I just felt horrible. And to top it all off, I don't think they liked me very much. I often got scratched, and it's not because I was being rough. It's just, it was an unfortunate experience. But the emotional, explicit experience, the episode that I remember, was a negative experience. Now, when we go below that line of explicit memory into implicit memory, the first layer of that, as Peter Levine teaches, is the experience of body language displaying your emotions. So this is an unconscious process. When I'm happy, I show body language perhaps like this. Or maybe when I'm sad, I show body language like this. Or maybe I'm angry and I show body language where I clench my fists and my shoulders and I scrunch up my face.
Mm-hmm.
And so these emotions are shown in a physical way, and that's the body unconsciously doing it. And
Yeah.
speaking of co-regulation, we respond to the other person's body language and
Mm.
mirror that with our mirror neurons. And so it's a much more powerful thing in terms of how it affects our nervous system than the word cat in this example,
Right.
or even the emotions I can describe of what I described my early experience with cats were. And my body shows that.
Mm.
On the
Yeah.
deepest level is what's called implicit procedural memory. And that's the body basically going into an automatic nervous system state that allows us to survive, to adapt to whatever situation is
Mm-hmm.
there. So this, imagine, we perceive the world, and unconsciously our nervous system does this thing called neuroception instead of perception. It's this unconscious scanning of our
Yeah.
environment, and that's that body memory. And it brings up those
Yeah.
feelings of attraction or repulsion. In my case, for cats, my deep implicit memory was, okay, I felt
Mm.
that repulsion immediately. My body language
Right.
then showed that. I felt the explicit emotions. And of course, I could say the words, the most external layer, a cat. Okay, hold on. Let me be
Yeah.
careful here. And so, underneath all of what we can perceive, this implicit memory is most of what's running the show that sets the
Yeah.
tone for our nervous system. Our emotions, behaviors, thoughts, feelings all stem from this
Mm.
mode in the implicit that's going on. And of course, if we go to relationships, this is what's most powerful around implicit memory, because whatever our early developmental experiences were, well, that's going to show up if somebody does
Mm.
something that reminds us on that deep, deep implicit body level. So
Right.
if we
Yeah.
were abused and someone does a gesture like our abuser, well, all of a sudden our body's going to respond as if we're back in that situation. And we might think it's the
Yeah.
person now, but it's that implicit memory from back before we can recall
Right.
consciously.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so fascinating too, because again, this was true for me, and it's true for my clients, is that I never connected the dots between my train wreck of relationships, okay? If I'm being totally transparent. And people that know me know I am like totally transparent, right? Train wreck, and that's an understatement. Of relationships my entire life. Um I never connected the dots back to my childhood, right? Um because and again, with the type of trauma that I had, which really was a lot of pre-verbal attachment trauma, that I didn't
Mm,
have a memory of, oh, somebody abused me. It was more of like what didn't happen, right?
mm,
um or so I didn't connect it, but my body sure was expressing, my nervous system was expressing itself through that implicit memory,
mm.
right?
Absolutely. Man, can I
Yeah.
relate to that? The tumultuous relationships that I had no idea were connected to my early development and implicit memory.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
I'm like you. I had quite a few train wrecks, and you know, two marriages and divorces later, and some education. Now I can start to recognize those patterns and go, wait a second. Okay, that's what my body wants to do. What
Yeah.
would allow me to be more regulated rather than maybe excited, but
Right.
stressed in a way
Yeah.
that repeats old patterns?
Exactly. And that's something, you know, some of my clients that are single women out there trying to date, um, that familiarity, right? And here's where the story comes in. Maybe you could help with this a little bit.
Sure.
um, that story of, wow, I met this great guy, and it's kind of going fast, and I don't know, he's like showering me with flowers or dinner, whatever it is. It kind of is that pattern where things move kind of fast. um,
Mm,
and I always say that, when they say to watch out for red flags, but for some people with trauma, red flags can be green flags, right? we don't
Mm.
know the difference.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so there's this pattern of going too fast in new relationships. And then um, if something shows up in that, you've already made that emotional connection, it's hard
Mm.
to backtrack. And that was true. That was the nature of my relationships, that cycle, right?
Mm.
And I see a lot of people in that same state. But what do you have to add about that kind of, you know,
Mm.
when we're those things that seem exciting, and it's really hard to break that pattern, right?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, man, I could go on and on about this. So let me start here. My first thought is when I learned initially about this concept called the infatuation stage. That is, our attachment systems, when they sense a person that
Mm,
is the right fit for what's familiar from early development. And
yeah.
we're not gonna consciously recognize it. We're just gonna feel
Right.
excitement. We're just gonna feel
Yeah.
like, oh, I've been waiting for this person my whole life. I'm so
Yeah.
excited. They're perfect for me. Wow, I get
Right.
so stimulated and I feel loved and all of these wonderful feelings show up.
Yeah.
And we need to be careful because after somewhere between 6 months and 2 years, that period wears off. And what's
Mhm.
underneath is all of the negative triggers that will start to emerge that if we weren't conscious about it, we're going to start to go through the same spin cycle of the same relational patterns that we didn't see coming before in our last relationship.
Right.
So yeah, for me, it was experiences of emotional neglect and
Mm.
emotional abuse. That was
Mm.
familiar to me. Uh,
Okay.
Excitement in terms of, uh, you know, lots of exciting sexual feelings and
Mhm.
this deep romantic vision of wow, we were meant to be together,
Yeah.
and to look at all of the things we have in common. And there's a part of that that's beautiful. And
Right, for sure.
what I've learned is that I need to slow down a little bit
Yeah.
and take my time and make sure that I'm not bonding so quickly that I
Mhm.
lose my sense of the other patterns that are not so easy to see.
Yeah.
And typically, those patterns for me have shown up as this sense of urgency. I have to see her again soon.
Mm.
And I start
Mm.
compromising different areas of my life. Like, okay, well, I don't have to schedule a client then. I can lose that income for this one day, and then it keeps
Mm.
happening. Or, yeah, I didn't exercise today, but I think I'd really rather go on, and do this adventure. Oh, it's so spontaneous. That's exciting. And we
Yeah.
lose touch with our routine, with what balances us and keeps us lower in our stress load. And for me, that's the
Mm.
biggest sign. If my stress load is going up outside of that new bond,
Mhm.
that's the first sign
Yeah.
I look for, because that's typically what I missed in all of my other
Mm.
relationships. And it's
Yeah.
great, but I'm like, okay, but have I lost touch with the things that I do for me by myself? It's a sense of
Mm.
losing myself, which is actually
Yeah.
the theme I'm working through with my therapist right now. Losing myself in relationships is an
Mhm.
unconscious pattern that I did.
Mm.
And so actually
Yeah.
committing to not committing until I get a sense of myself with this person, not just, oh wow,
Mm.
what are we together? This amazing enmeshed duo.
Mm. Enmeshed duo. Oh, wow. That's brilliant. Enmeshed duo. That yeah, can we coin that term? Enmeshed duo. That's exactly. Yeah, that's brilliant. I've never heard that
Cool.
before.
It just came to
Um
me, actually.
yeah, and so you said something there that was really you said that you get a sense of who you are within that relationship, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
it's
that
it's almost like a superhero identity, you might say. It's this, wow, they make me feel so good. They see all of my good qualities, which is part of
mm,
the infatuation stage. And
mm,
they're not noticing all of my faults. And this is pretty
ye-
typical in any relationship, whether you've had trauma or not, to have
yeah.
that infatuation stage sort of put a blinder on. And so
Mm,
because my identity shifts in a way that makes me feel good, why would I try and fix something that's not broken in that moment? But
mm,
that's the
yeah.
unconscious part that didn't look at those patterns. Now I look at that and I go, wow, this feels really good. And I know that there's a shelf life on this phase of relationship
Mm,
connection. And that if I don't do the work now to look at how we're interacting in a way that helps us to be more regulated, more balanced together,
yeah.
and making sure both of our lives are balanced. Maybe
Right.
one person in the dynamic gives up for the sake of the other, and the other person keeps benefiting, and until the other person finally feels resentment for not getting their own needs met, when they were
Yeah.
both complicit in just following along this path, rather
Yeah.
than being conscious about, okay, how is it actually playing out? Let's
Mm,
enjoy it, and at the same time be mindful of, are all of the other areas of my life getting better, or are they being
mm,
compromised in some way? I think that's probably
yeah.
the biggest red flag that tends to be hidden.
Mm, yeah. So it is really difficult to go through that when we are drawn to the familiar, right?
Mm,
And to break out of those patterns. Oftentimes people feel it's kind of flat, right? Because we're used to those that intermittent reinforcement,
yes.
wild swings,
Mm.
unpredictability.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The
So,
highs of dopamine and adrenaline
yes,
and
it's great, right?
yeah.
So, that relationship that is healthy can seem kind of flat or boring, right?
Mm.
It's not because we're not used to that.
Yes. I find that in the moment, this is one of the most difficult things for me personally to distinguish. There are
Mm,
connections that I make that are more flat, and I'll notice, oh, those are more secure relationship patterns. Why
yeah.
am I not as excited as I would like to be? And
Right.
that can be frustrating sometimes. It can feel like,
Yeah.
okay, I see the positive signs that this is a more secure bond, but I don't feel
Yeah.
that excitement that I want to feel. And often we'll
Mm.
label that as, oh no, this person isn't right for me.
Yep, that's right. The story is, oh, that you know, there's no physical attraction, and that could be true. But oftentimes, I'll hear that I just decided I wanted to be friends with that person because not it's not going anywhere. But then
Yeah.
they find that that adrenaline, that dopamine hit, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
how do we how do we differentiate that? That is really, really hard to do with when we're talking about the nervous system.
Yeah.
And whether this person is boring, so I think I just want to be friends with them because it feels kind of flat.
Yeah. Well, I find that reframing flat and
Hmm.
perhaps boring to by using mindfulness is a really
Mm,
helpful way to really distinguish what is not a match versus it's just
yeah.
not stressing my system out like I'm familiar with.
Mm,
Right?
that's right.
If you can
Stressing the system out. Yeah.
if you can get used to, and this is an ongoing journey for me, I think we teach what we most need to learn.
Right. Totally.
And one of my practices in order to combat this tendency is to start, well, it's to take a moment at least every day,
Mm.
if not many,
Hmm.
when it's very calm, when simple things are happening, like I have this cool drink right here, and just taking note. It's not very sweet, and so it's
Hmm.
simple. And as I take a sip, just noticing the sensations. Oh, there's this cool washing of energy that I feel down the front of my body, and just taking a moment to appreciate
Hmm.
that thing that might be considered mundane. There's not a whole lot of excitement in that. But
Yeah.
if I slow down, I can start to notice and appreciate deeper levels of awareness of what's going on in my life, noticing
Yeah.
sensations rather than that overwhelming excitement that can numb us out a bit. And so if we can get used to appreciating those simple moments, I find that it's easier to recognize them in relationships. Again, I'm
Mm,
far from perfect in this. And in the journey, I try and do that just a little bit more every time. Just
yeah.
bring that to my attention. Like, okay, what's something that's simple that I can just appreciate? So if I'm getting to know someone, we're dating, and we have an opportunity to watch a show together, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it's not as exciting as going out on the town, but can we be comfortable in silence? That's a
Mm.
great sign for
Oh,
me
yeah.
to just be there and just be with each other without having to say anything to fill those empty spaces.
That's
To
right.
just go, wow, what's the emotional experience I'm having watching this show? And maybe have a dialogue about that and see, do we resonate there? Do we not? It's
Yeah.
okay. We can
Mm-hmm.
appreciate our differences as well as what we enjoy together. And so these little nuances of mindful moments where we can notice and appreciate when we're regulated, when the stress system is not maxed out. For
Right.
me, for me, I find that that is a great way to get clearer as a process. Of course, it's going to take
Mm-hmm.
time and get better over time, but get a little more clearer than we were before
Yeah.
because we've taken those moments to slow down.
That's right. Yeah, I love that. So, so important. And this work really, um, it's a it's a process, and it's so complex, right? Because just
Mm.
slowing down can be really hard for people to do.
Yes. And of course, as you know so well with your work, yeah, somatic experiencing, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Among other things, I'm sure. The concept of trauma informed mindfulness is coming to mind, that we
Mm.
don't want to ever force ourselves to do something that's calm and still that we don't want to do.
Right.
Um, so I actually have a life story that might be helpful for illustrating this.
Okay. Yes,
I,
share.
so, as I've mentioned to you personally, outside of this live, I used to dissociate so easily. I could
Mm.
fall asleep on my feet at a party in a conversation in high school.
Wow.
It was
Wow.
something I thought was just, oh, that's kind of cool. I can fall asleep easy. And I didn't
Mm-hmm.
realize that both the accelerator and the brake were on at the same time in my
Mm.
nervous system. And I was exhausted. And
Yeah.
so part of it was exhaustion from a high stress load, but it was
Mm-hmm.
also because I was so stressed out that I hit that immobilization shutdown response.
Mm.
And it explains to me why I was drawn to physical activities. Because one of the ways, as you know, Tracy, that we can
Mm-hmm.
shift from that immobilized state is to get our bodies moving and to
Yeah.
do it in a mindful way where we're not overworking ourselves. And by the way, this is a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the work I do with people in mindful movement and fitness, is to, instead of stressing the system out by just beating the crap out of ourselves in our fitness, like CrossFit,
Yeah.
for example. Nothing wrong with CrossFit if you like it. However, it can be overdone. And if you do it in a
Absolutely.
way, yeah, if
Yeah.
you do it in a way where at the end of your workout, perhaps you have a sense of rejuvenation, that you're energized rather than
Mm-hmm.
completely depleted. Over time, you'll find not only is it more sustainable, but you'll get a lot more out of each experience and you'll get a positive association with it.
Right.
So back to
Yeah.
my life experience here, I tried meditating probably
Mm-hmm.
about 20 some years ago, and I found that I would always space out, and I was
Mm.
not comfortable keeping my eyes closed. My mind would keep wandering. Later
Right.
on, I found that that process of not being comfortable closing my eyes and sitting still was
Mm-hmm.
my body needing to mobilize. It was re-experiencing that implicit memory of trauma, of feeling helpless and shut down.
Right.
And because I thought I had to, I forced
Yeah.
myself in it, and it
Oh,
never got
yeah.
better. I
Yeah.
couldn't focus anymore. No matter how hard I tried, I thought there was something wrong with me.
Yeah.
I accidentally stumbled upon a way of changing that by learning Tai Chi. Tai,
Mm.
tai Chi being a gentle, mindful movement practice, it allowed my system to mobilize while being mindful, relaxed,
Mm.
focusing on my sensations. And the process led me to being able to meditate comfortably where I didn't space
Mm.
out as easily. I gave my
Yeah.
body a new context for being still instead of that immobilized trauma response. It
Right.
learned to be calm and relaxed because I let it move the way it wanted to. I listened to my body. It felt good. I felt empowered. And so
Mm.
any type of movement where we can follow what we want to do. Playfulness is even more important.
Yeah.
It's, as I'm sure you're familiar with, Tracy, this concept of limbic system therapy, also known as
Yeah.
limbic body therapy, limbic brain being the emotional processing
Mm-hmm.
center, among other things. And we can create a new emotional context for the same experience of stress that's playful. And so
Beautiful. Yeah.
that Tai Chi experience allowed me to process that level of dissociation so I could actually be still and I could
I love
meditate
that.
in a way
Yeah.
that didn't put me back into that re-traumatized, immobilized state. And of
That's
course,
right.
my story was, oh, you're just a space cadet, Mike. You get hyperactive sometimes and you space out and you can't
Mm,
focus. That's just who you are. And
that's
people
right.
would sort of dismiss, any other possibility of my identity. I
That's
remember
right.
one relationship early on. She would say on a regular basis, "Oh yeah, Mike, he can't remember things. That's just how he
Mm,
is." And she didn't know any better. But
yeah.
what was going on is it was a trauma adaptation to keep me from feeling pain, from discomfort in
That's
my
right.
body. And
Yeah.
so that shutdown, that dissociation, kept me safe as far as my body was concerned. But
Yeah.
then it needed to learn that new context, the way of being in that still space and doing it on my own terms.
Yeah.
Oh man, what a game changer that's been.
What a game changer, right? And so empowering, because how many people, and I know people come to me and they say, I can't meditate. I have a really hard time. It's so uncomfortable. And I say, of course it is, because you're trying to force your body and your nervous system to do something that it can't do right now. So let's see if we can try something else instead. But most of the people out there teaching meditation or whatever it is what you got to do. You got to sit still. You got to sit there for
Mm,
20, and then people are like, oh, but if, and then there must be something wrong with me because I can't seem to get it right.
mm, yeah, yeah.
And that was
It's
my experience too. If you can't do it, you got to just you got to do more of it because you got to try harder. I heard that you got to try harder from coaches and teachers who are and then what happens, you try and it just gets worse and you give up
mm,
after a while.
it's so tragic that our
Yeah.
cultural narrative reinforces this, go hard or go home
Mm,
mentality
mm,
where if you're not getting something, well, you just have to try harder to get it.
yeah.
And we're actually telling our bodies that the adaptation it's doing to keep us
Yeah.
safe, so it thinks,
Right.
is not okay. And so it's going to fight harder. It's like
Yeah.
resisting against something. Naturally, the pushback happens and our bodies will
Right.
fight us if we try and fight our bodies.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right. That nervous system has got to be respected because it will slam on the brakes. And
mm,
pushing past that, just trying to force and push way out of your window of tolerance. That's how I burned out really
mm.
bad, like really bad. It took me years to come back from that. It was, and I see that a lot, right? It really leads to chronic burnout.
Big time. I was a
Yeah.
chronic coffee drinker, caffeinated coffee, espresso,
Mm.
quad, or even 5 shot, venti
Oh, wow.
espressos, and I
Yeah.
would do several of those a day, and I had no idea why I would pass out
Mm.
in the middle of the day of exhaustion. I thought,
Yeah.
wow, I this is what I need. Oh, I feel so great when I drink that coffee. I didn't know that my nervous system was already at the very edge of that mobilization zone, and
Right.
taking that caffeine actually made me fall asleep. It immobilized me.
Mm.
It wasn't helpful. And so I thought, oh wow, caffeine has the opposite effect on me. Not really. It's
Yeah.
still revving up my nervous system. It's just that
Absolutely.
we don't generally get taught in our culture that when we get past the point of overwhelm, that we shut down.
Yeah.
And that's actually a higher level of stress. Being
Yeah.
depressed, spacing
Mm.
out, not having any energy, not being able to focus, procrastination. All of
Yeah.
these are signs that, feeling helpless, hopeless, apathetic. We're in a shutdown response.
Oh, yeah.
It's not our fault. It's the way our bodies are trying to protect us. And if we can
Yeah.
recognize that and map out where we are in that nervous system response, we can act in a way that helps us rather than makes it worse. Like that coffee drinking habit I had. I must have spent $10,000 a year at Starbucks. It was
Mm.
crazy.
Wow. Yeah. I still drink coffee, and I know it's not good for the nervous system, but
if you do it moderately, and of course we have one, habit to change at a time that's, sustainable, right? Try and change
yeah,
everything all of a sudden,
I
and it's,
know. Yeah,
it's
yeah,
gonna bounce back. That's
for
that's actually,
sure.
speaking of which, that's one of the things I address in my Facebook group. If anyone's interested
Mm-hmm.
in finding a way to change your fitness habits, and this includes emotional fitness as well as
Mm,
physical fitness and
yeah,
mental fitness and spiritual fitness, connecting you to your values and what's important to you.
right. Yeah.
I talk about the concept of building through levels of mastery so
Mm,
that it's slow enough that you can sustain it and make it automatic once
mm,
you're there with a simple step. Like, let's say you drink 5 cups of coffee a day. Let's try
yeah.
4
Yeah.
and see how that
Yeah.
goes.
That's
And
right.
once that's automatic, it's like, okay, well, that's my new normal. And
Yeah.
then maybe I'll take something else out. Maybe I'll add in a cup of tea in that place that doesn't have caffeine and get that
Mm-hmm.
same warm, soothing experience. And it's not going to be easy. It's old habits die hard. But
Mm,
if we do one little thing at a time, we're less likely to do this yo-yo diet or yo-yo,
right.
anything, including our habits that we try and change with fitness. I started with 10 minutes a day doing
Mm,
my strength training. And now it's a 2 hour plus regimen that I do daily to regulate my
yeah.
nervous system, including cardio and strength and flexibility and breathing work and navigating sensations. But if I had done that all at once, I would have been overwhelmed. There's no way
Oh,
I would have
yeah.
kept on doing it. There's no
That's
way.
right. Yeah. Yeah. And that sustainability is so important, right? Moving in
Mm,
these slower, intentional, titrated ways.
mm. I,
Um, yeah, that's, the things that are sustainable, not these like, again, going back to those extremes,
the quick fix, take a
the
pill,
quick
do
fix. Yeah.
do it exactly this way and just put tons of effort in, willpower it. I've heard this phrase recently, to David Goggins it. He's famous for, working through things with willpower beyond
Mm-hmm.
any sense of pain or the body's limits. And there's something inspiring about that. However, it
Yeah.
it mirrors what our cultural values are that actually makes it pretty horrible experience for most people, in terms of
Absolutely.
the symptoms that show up from a high stress load.
Yeah, that
So,
high stress load. And let's talk a little bit about attachment
mm,
trauma, right? Which
yes,
is that high stress load started in childhood.
mm,
Um, really, when you're an infant, that bonding, that is the attachment, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's so important to to understand what's going on there, because that's what's happening in our adult relationships. We repeat those patterns.
That's right. But those patterns, again, are not, we don't have that explicit memory of those patterns. So we don't always connect um, that stuff and our relationships, and then
Mm,
the story, well, my partner, this or that, or whatever they're doing, right?
mm.
Yeah,
Should should
we're
should
not connecting that.
should I go into the different attachment patterns and in childhood and
Yeah.
how they show up in adulthood?
Yeah, let's talk about that, because it's not a personality trait, right? I mean, it's so much more than that.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that, well, a number of attachment researchers, but specifically Alan Shore's work,
Hmm.
he's opened up this amazing understanding of attachment styles, you might call them, from the behavioral side, and showing what's going on in the nervous system underneath. Not
Mm,
only
yeah,
now in our adult experience, but what was the developmental experience as an infant that
yeah,
shaped the implicit memory that leads to very predictable patterns of the
yeah,
nervous system and behaviors that really show what's going on in the nervous system. So, my thought is to describe secure attachment functioning and how
mm,
that happens early on and in adulthood, and then maybe backtrack into the insecure styles.
yeah, yeah. So secure.
Mm,
Yeah, ideally.
being flexible and
Being
having that
flexible.
flexibility with meeting your own needs and meeting
Mhm.
your partner's needs, and doing it in a way where you're not compromising yourself. You're going,
Mm.
okay, I'm able to put it aside because I'm regulated enough to focus on my partner because I can see he or she needs that more than I do in this moment, and make sure to get back to my needs as well. And
Mm.
this flexibility, I would
Mm.
say, is the most important
Flexibility.
characteristic of secure functioning. Uh,
Yeah. And that
it's
is that
also aware.
yeah, and so it's that interdependence, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's
Yeah.
characterized by a relational experience that has an exchange that's flexible,
Mm.
giving and receiving this implicit body language that we
Yeah.
respond to, and we can start to notice by mindfully noticing, how we feel in the presence of our partner. It
Yeah.
will in undoubtedly reflect something that we experienced early on. And as we do the healing work, we can start to change those patterns, which is,
Mm.
it's a long process. It really
Oh,
is.
yeah.
So my thought is to talk about what the developmental experience is in secure attachment. So
Mhm.
let's say a mother who is bonding with her infant in a way where she's able to attune to the
Mm.
infant's needs emotionally. So, crying and distinguishing that cry means, oh, dirty diaper. Oh, that cry means he or she's hungry. Oh, that
Mm.
cry, oh, she's cold. Oh, she just wants to be comforted and supported. And
Yeah.
it doesn't need to happen perfectly. It could be a
Right.
learning experience where you just keep trying until you get it as a parent.
Yeah.
There's a tendency to look at this stuff and go, oh man, this sounds like a tall order. I don't know if I can do it. And the truth is that a secure attachment results from 30% of the time being attuned. The
Mhm.
other the other 70% is repair.
Right.
It
That's right.
it's repairing
Yeah.
when we don't get it right. And so the baby will keep crying if you pay attention until you
Mhm.
get it right. So they basically teach you as a parent how to do it properly,
Yeah.
if you're paying attention. And so
Yeah.
that's really the key piece. If you're not regulated yourself, it's going to be difficult to do that for your child. And
That's
this
right.
is where those patterns can be passed on unconsciously through the
Yeah.
generations, right?
Yeah. So yeah, and that's the thing. If we can think, going back to to our main caregiver, right?
Mm,
Um, what their state might have been at the time, what was going on in their life, what kind of relationship were they in, or maybe they were a single parent,
mm,
did they have an addiction issue, did they have a mental health issue, were they depressed, were they stressed, were they in a relationship that was abusive, all of those things, to get a sense. Did they have, did they, or maybe they were just, busy and working, or maybe you were a baby that was in the NICU because you were premature, and right.
mm.
Um,
Yes, yes.
and I think depending how old you are, um, we're just getting to this point now where they actually have like regulators, and where somebody will come and do that, but um, where you adoption trauma is a really big attachment wound, right? So,
Mm,
so many factors to consider, and what kind, if that caregiver, assuming your mother, um, you know, was a screaming baby, really stressful,
mm.
and that can be
Absolutely.
stressful, right? But
Sure.
um, or a lot of you know people that have babies, that is when your own trauma will start to show up, right? And that's what
Oh
I
yeah.
believe postpartum depression really is.
I'm with you on that. That makes a
Yeah.
whole lot of sense. Stan Tatkin, attachment researcher that I really appreciate following his work, he talks
Mm-hmm.
about how that exact phenomenon you're describing shows up whatever stage your child is in,
Mm.
will essentially trigger your implicit memories for when you were their
Mm.
age.
Yeah,
So
that's
whatever
right.
you went through,
Yeah.
they will basically mirror that back to you, and you will
Yeah.
feel like you did back then. So if
Yes.
you had attachment trauma as an infant, if you were
Mm,
adopted, or if you were premature and so you didn't have that skin to skin contact early on, or maybe your parent was there, but they were not emotionally present because they
mhm.
were depressed or anxious, some sort of mental health issue. Maybe they were being abused, or they had to work all the time and so they were distracted. There are
Yeah.
all of these things that can happen, often with very well intended parents who are doing
Mhm.
their very best. And so the basic attachment styles, for those of you who aren't familiar, if it's not secure, I would say the next level up in terms of stress would be the anxious ambivalent style, where
Mhm.
there's an inconsistency in the emotional attunement for the parent. So
Yeah.
maybe they're drinking, when the child is, uh, in one state, and then they're sober another, and so it's inconsistent, right? Because when
Mhm.
they're drunk, they're not going to be as attuned, right?
Right.
Or if they're going through a bipolar episode and they're completely detached and depressed and not motivated, they're not going to be able to attune at all. Versus
Right.
maybe the time when they're manic and then they're very attuned, but maybe
Yeah.
way too energetic.
Right.
So, how does that show up in adult relationships? Well, as soon as you have a partner that shows, for example, erratic behavior where they are really attuned to you and then they completely ignore you, that's going to
Mhm.
feel familiar and it's actually going to feel good to you in a sense. And you're going to have a sense that this relationship fits for you. It's going to
Mm.
feel familiar on a body level, whether you know it consciously or not. So,
Yeah.
in the anxious experience, typically they will partner up with somebody who's more avoidant, and they'll basically create the self-fulfilling prophecy where
Yeah.
they're with a partner who's not able to attune to them,
Right. That's
and
right.
so they want to get attention from their partner, and their avoidant partner, because they experienced neglect, that's what happens for the
Mhm.
avoidant. uh, they need distance because they're not developed enough to be able to handle that level of intimacy for that long, or for that
Right.
close, that much closeness, whatever it is for them.
Yeah.
And so there's this push pull dynamic because
Yeah.
of the early attachment wounding. And then, of course, you have the disorganized, otherwise known in the other schools of thought as fearful avoidant, where you
Mhm.
have a combination of both anxious and avoidant behaviors, which, if you look at the polyvagal curve chart and you look at the stress level of the fight flight response, where we're
Mhm.
mobilized like the anxious person, or the
Yep.
shutdown immobilized response like the avoidant person, the disorganized person will go above and below that line: spaced out,
Mm.
hyperactive, depressed, manic, above and below.
Mm.
That
Yeah.
PTSD cycle from extreme
Yeah.
trauma, where there was fear for the infant or the
Mm.
caregiver, whether the caregiver was actually abusive or if the caregiver was feeling fear. If they
Right.
were feeling fear states on a regular basis, the mirror neurons in that infant
Yeah.
and the parent, that will be exchanged body language wise, and that child will register that as normal.
Right. That's
To be
right.
scared in the presence of love, of connection.
Yeah.
And so there's this push pull thing going on, where in adult relationships, you're hot and you're like, oh, I need you. And then, oh, I need
Mhm.
space. And it just goes
Mm.
back and forth. I've often been told in my past relationships, I'm like that Katy Perry song: you're hot, then you're cold, or yes, then you're no, you're in, then you're out, you're up, then you're down, right? And that was my
Yeah.
nervous system trying to adapt and survive to these patterns that I was implicitly sensing in them, that was
That's right.
familiar, and it elicited my response of pushing away or
Yeah.
reaching.
That's right.
And so
Yeah.
until I figured out that's what was going on, I would
Mm.
just keep doing it over and over
Mm.
again, thinking, what's wrong with me? I want to
Right.
make relationships work. I love relationships. Why am I so bad at them?
Mm. Yeah. I
And
used to
that,
just say it was always the other person. That's the problem. If I could just
oh,
find somebody that could do this or that or be like this, everything would be great.
mm,
So it was, so my story was, I just can't find the right individual.
mm. Isn't that amazing though? The stories that we tell and what's going on
Yeah.
in the implicit realm. If we understand what's going on implicitly, we can start to have compassion for our own story, whatever it is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah. And so, that then, and again, we hear a lot of that, right? I guess I'll just stay alone because I can't seem to find anybody. And, everybody else is the problem. That was kind of
Mm,
how it was for me. Um,
yes.
so knowing this information is so empowering, and also knowing if we are in a relationship, our partner's attachment style, whether they're aware of it or not, or if they're doing any of this work, it helps us communicate because we can see them in a different light,
Mm,
right?
yes.
Yeah,
The first thought that comes to mind is often I will see in communities, online or in person, that talk about attachment as a behavior, as a
yeah,
personality type.
yeah,
Often there'll be this demonizing of the avoidant type.
right.
And the avoidant type, their behavior is an adaptation because they were neglected early
Hmm.
on. And so
Yeah,
their neurons of social engagement didn't develop.
that's
So
right.
what happens when they get into a relational context? Intimacy is unfamiliar and overwhelming.
Hmm.
They don't
Oh
have the
yeah,
neurological processing power to deal with that. So they try and distance. They
yeah,
try and get some space because they can't handle it.
that's right.
So if you know that that's what's going on underneath that behavior, you can keep from demonizing it and you can go, okay, cool. So now
Yeah,
I know what's going on underneath.
yeah.
Perhaps because, let's say in this example, I'm the anxious partner and I'm reaching for them, I can realize, okay, how can I resource myself? Maybe talk to a friend so I don't
Mhm.
overwhelm them and get back to, okay, so what's a middle ground that allows us to both grow without being overwhelmed in one way or another,
Mm,
from
that's
feeling
right.
abandoned on the anxious
Yeah,
side or feeling
yeah,
overwhelmed on the avoidant side? It's this sense
yeah,
of what's the common ground where we can meet together and both grow toward that secure place.
right. Because that's what grows to secure. So I have a little confession. I'm pretty avoidant,
Mm,
and that might seem, shocking to hear that a woman, because most people think of men as avoidant.
mm,
But because of my extreme neglect by my primary caregiver, my mother, um, avoidant was my go-to. And
mm,
so exactly as you say, that intimacy, and I would think, man, you guys are too needy. That was, again, the story is, I don't like these needy, clingy
mm. Yes.
Klingons. No, go
Right?
away. I'm
Yeah.
trapped. I would literally feel trapped. Like
Mm.
I had to flee,
Yes.
right?
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Staying busy, right? Trying to distract yourself from anything but this overwhelming experience of too
Yeah.
much intimacy. It's like, okay, I want it, but
Yeah.
too
Yeah.
much, too much.
Right. But the thing with that too is, I always say, I found emotionally unavailable people, but I was also emotionally unavailable and
Mm.
intimately unavailable, right?
Hmm.
Even though I wanted that because I was seeking it out and
Yes.
searching for that, I didn't know how to do that, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, and so this work allows me to also be emotionally available.
Yes. Oh my goodness. It you can develop an emotional, uh, so going to the language of nonviolent communication, he talks about Marshall Rosenberg, who created it. He talks
Mhm.
about creating a needs and feelings literacy.
Mm,
I remember when I first
mm,
looked at the system, I was so enamored by it and also
yeah,
overwhelmed. I looked at this
mm,
list of needs that might be something that applies to me, and I'm like,
yeah,
I didn't know those many different types of needs existed.
right.
And all of these possible emotions, I've never heard of half of these, and I certainly couldn't identify them in myself. And
Yeah.
so by going through the lists and going through this process, I actually developed the capacity to notice when I'm feeling something other than anger, happiness, or
Mhm.
sadness. I mean, that those are pretty basic, but what about disgust or hope or joy or uh, gratitude and
Mm,
noticing what that feels like in my body,
mhm.
I actually
Yeah,
had to develop the neural capacity to
right.
recognize that through one
Yeah,
step at a time. It was quite an
yeah.
education, and
Quite, yeah.
still going.
Still going. That
Yeah.
is the truth. Me too on that one. And but yeah, the beautiful thing that comes with building that nervous system capacity, we get to that, you know, we get to where we start to feel, and I didn't know that I had needs or that I could ask. So, you
Mm,
know, so my clients kind of all go through this process of, oh, now I'm starting to feel my body and my needs, right? Because my needs come from my body. There's something
mm,
signaling, you know, maybe I need to have a conversation. Well, what most people, you know, are they don't have the conversation, even with a safe enough partner, because it
mm.
seems too confronting,
Yes.
or like conflict, especially if they're in that kind of people pleasing, fawning,
Mm,
you know, they can't even go to a partner to ask, even though it's most likely a safe enough situation to do that, right?
yes.
Um, yeah, because that has to also feel safe. And then now my body is speaking to me. I have a need, and I have to also build the capacity to be able to ask for what I need. So I built the
Mm,
capacity to feel that I have needs, and that comes from my body. And now I got to
yes.
build more capacity to to work up the courage to ask for what I need, right?
My goodness. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then the way that we can do that, instead of whatever we were doing before, yelling and screaming or shutting, or you know, doing the silent treatment or whatever it was to try to get our needs met, right?
Mm, yes.
Now we can use, I really like the Gottman Institute,
Mm,
of the way that they do communication. Now we can, it's probably similar. It might be similar to nonviolent communication. Um, you know, now we can use this language because we're regulated enough to, you know, ask the other person, hey, you know, do you have time right now? I've got something I want to share with you, or whatever it is, right?
mm.
Yeah.
Yes. I've noticed that there's this step in learning to change those behaviors, in
Mm-hmm.
being willing to sit in the experience of discomfort when someone says, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you about something, you know, in an hour when I'm
Yeah.
finished whatever this is that I'm doing." And recognizing that my body is so uncomfortable, at least it was initially
Yeah.
when I first heard a statement like that, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to sit with that for an hour. Oh man, how do I distract myself? What can I eat? What can I do to keep myself from feeling this, right? And
Yeah.
to learn to go, okay, I'm feeling a lot of discomfort in this, but this is
Yeah.
where the work happens. And so I
Yeah.
can, okay, how much of it am I able to feel and manage it without being overwhelmed?
Mhm.
Okay, well, let me
Yeah.
just notice one sensation. Oh, there's a little tension in my chest. Huh. I think it's on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most tense, it's like a 7. Whew. Okay, and it's a little warm. And on a scale of 1 to 10, that warmth is, it's like a 6. Okay, and so as I
Mhm.
breathe and feel it, and let it go one breath at a time, breathing in
Mhm.
awareness and exhale, letting it go a couple times. Then I start to notice, oh, that tension is now a 6. And that
Yeah.
warmth is actually like a 3. Wow.
Yeah.
So those sensations are changing. And it gives me the sense that I've processed and let go of some of that discomfort in
Yeah.
real time.
In real
It's,
time. Yeah.
mm,
So that is really hard. I like to say that's kind of advanced work, right?
it
When
is. It
we're
is.
able to stay in connection even though we're uncomfortable,
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah.
right?
I find that making agreements in the moment of, okay, I can't regulate with you right now, and I'd
Mhm.
love to work this out because I'm committed to staying connected. Can I take an hour to go on a walk and regulate myself by myself? Because
Yeah.
it's easier for me to do that. And then I'll come back more present and we can talk about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
right.
that may be a little less advanced, especially for those who have any avoidance in their system. I know I do.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I do with clients, is just kind of beginning to see if we can have a dialogue with somebody that we haven't, assuming that they haven't had these kinds of conversations before, right? They've just left, or somebody's, slamming doors and stomping around, but they're not communicating, whatever that thing was, right?
Yes.
And now we're actually beginning, because we have this capacity, we're actually able to dialogue like that, finding out if somebody else has, hey, do you have capacity to, you know, share with me, checking in with them, right? And then tracking your own nervous system as you're in the conversation.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Staying in that conversation. When I first started to do it, my thing is run, gone. I'm out of here. Done. I'm gone.
Yes.
So it was super hard to, stay in that. And I could feel my body want to flee. Flee. That's what I want to do. I want to get up and run, right?
Yeah.
And the person I was talking to said, notice that you want to get up and run, don't you? Yep. Yes, I do. Yes, I do want to get up and run. And I was literally like moving and tapping my feet under the table, right?
Yes.
And exhaling really long. But then I was able to stay with it. I'm not going to run. Is it okay if I'm doing this? Because this helps me regulate. But I can stay in this connection with you, but I'm going to be kind of bouncing,
Yes. I love how
Yeah.
your example models that your body wanted to go into a flee response. It wanted to move. And so instead of fighting that and just trying to sit still and just process this discomfort, let yourself move and give your body an expression of that desire to flee through movement.
Yeah, through
And
movement.
it's a great example of, instead of fighting our body's responses, going, okay, how can I work with it? I'm just going to be bouncy in this conversation because this is what I need to do.
Totally. Yeah.
And maybe even make it playful like that. Like, I hope you don't mind, but I need to bounce right now, and that'll help me stay more present with you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And how, and how we can allow that to move through us, right? It's such a beautiful practice to go through and to have this understanding, because it builds connection. It really does build connection.
Yeah, that rupture and repair cycle. Whenever there's a rupture, Stan Tatkin again talks about this all the time. When you are when you're using an avoidance strategy to avoid conflict, it's going to build this wall between you, and connection is going to be depleted. And of course, sometimes we need that space, and so we just need to have a commitment to come back and connect, while at the same time being gentle enough with ourselves that we can go, okay, my body wants to avoid this right now, so let me give it a little bit of time and space so that it feels there's an honoring of the response it wants to do to protect me. And with that honoring, kind of like when you do parts work, you don't want to fight that part, you want to make friends with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So good. So good. I just want to check in with our audience and see if anybody has any questions at this point, since we've been going for a while. Take a pause. Because we've covered quite a bit, and I want to see if anyone has any questions. Feel free to. I don't know if that shows up on here. It should. Can you see the chat on your end?
Me? I see the chat, and I don't see anything in it right now.
Yeah, I don't either.
I see the chat. Oops. Oh, in the comments. There are tons of comments, so go to the comment section.
Yeah. Okay. Any got a little triggering. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I can
That
imagine.
makes sense. Yeah. It's kind of a lot. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh, uh, One woman said, "That's me. I live alone with my dogs." LOL. Yeah, you can co-regulate with an animal, like a dog or a cat,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a really helpful tool. So
Mm-hmm.
although I do get the joke of keeping distance from people and being with, a being that can't trigger us like another human being can,
Right.
there's a really positive experience. And as a matter of fact, there are plenty of wonderful trauma therapies, including being with horses and other, service animals to help us regulate our nervous systems. So it's actually a
Yeah.
wonderful thing.
Yeah. It really is. Yeah. Animals in nature for me are the best regulators. All right. Let me see what's happening. All right. So I don't see any questions.
This will be posted, and so people can write them in after the fact, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Um, yeah. So if anybody's watching the replay, definitely we can, come back and answer questions. Um, yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, two more comments here. Okay, that was a lot. I'll be rewatching this later. And Annie says, "I've been lifting weights with a trainer and I've noticed a difference with concentration." Oh, yeah. Isn't that amazing how when you move your body and you build your capacity for resilience, that is challenging yourself to get stronger, more flexible,
Mm-hmm.
better cardiovascular fitness? Part of what's going on there, I'll just add on to why that happens. Uh, this concept of limbic system therapy. You're building resilience in your nervous system through
Mm-hmm.
activity where you're building skills, you're building mastery, you're building competence, and it gives a new context for your nervous system where what was an overwhelming state of stress, let's say at one level of strength, let's say you can only do 5 push-ups, you get to a place where you can do 20 push-ups, you're going to feel stronger in your nervous system in that same level of stress where you did 5 push-ups before. That's going to feel easy. And so you build your resilience and your ability to regulate through fitness, especially if you do it listening to your body. And that's where
Yeah.
I focus with my clients, by the way. So if anyone's interested in that, I'd be happy to post a link to the Facebook group. It's free. And I just want to build a supportive community where we can support one another and talk about how we build our better habits on all levels of self. So
I
if
love
anyone's
that.
interested, I would be happy to welcome anyone who's interested.
Yeah. Okay. Can you speak about Thai massage? I don't know anything about Thai massage.
So I've had a Thai massage. I love Thai massage. So essentially, it's this combination. My limited understanding and experience with it is that it's this combination of deep tissue massage with stretching. So the therapist will help you to stretch deeply, and they'll go deeply into the tissues. So I found that this was particularly helpful for me to improve my range of motion when I wasn't able to get more flexible by myself. I've learned quite a few tools since then. But Thai massage is also, I can imagine, in hindsight, a wonderful co-regulation tool because there's an intimacy, there's a closeness there where they're getting really close to you and helping guide you in a way where they're supporting you to feel better. They're supporting your muscles to be more supple and relaxed. And so I can imagine this would help you to co-regulate, just like sort of a surrogate sort of practice experience in intimacy with a partner. It's not an attachment bond, but it's kind of practice for it. The ability to be vulnerable and let go and allow someone to just to give you support to
Yeah.
help you to feel better. It's not easy to allow people to help us sometimes. And so
Right.
that can be a great practice for deepening our ability to co-regulate with our partners.
Love that. Love that. Awesome. Okay. I think we'll stop here. Yeah, because it was a lot of it. It was a lot of information. We covered a lot of ground, and I think people can kind of go back and digest it a little bit.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, and then maybe we'll I don't know, do it again. Because because we covered a lot. And so what we'll do, so thanks everyone for tuning in. Anyone coming on and watching the replay, we're happy to come back and answer questions, or feel free to, DM me. If you can find this video, Mike, on my page, you can just add your group in the comments.
Perfect. I'll do
people.
that.
Yeah, that'd be great. And your website or whatever else you have, that'd be awesome. And maybe we'll do this again. Yeah. Put something together.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful for you bringing me into your fold here and to your audience. It's always a pleasure talking with you. And
that was great.
I'd love to do it again.
We'll have to do it again, because we covered, we just like barely scratched the surface. And I know it was a lot of information. I want people to have time to kind of take all that in and digest it, especially with the attachment stuff. The first time I heard about that, it was like, oh, wow, okay, that's, I get it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. A lot of layers to that.
A lot of layers to that. Yeah. So everyone take your time. Please reach out. If you have questions, or if any material came up for you, I always like to help people through that. Because there's a lot here. All right. Thanks again, Mike. Cool. This was fantastic. Really good stuff. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. Likewise.
All right. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.